Hello, my name is Caroline. Welcome to my channel. Today, in this video, I'd like to read from this book, Invention, Learn How Inventions Have Changed Our World. And let's get started, and I hope you enjoy it. Batteries. Over 2,000 years ago, the Greek scientist Thales produced small electric sparks by rubbing a cloth against amber. A yellow resin formed from the sap of the long-dead trees. But it was a long time before people succeeded in harnessing this power to produce a battery, a device for producing a steady flow of electricity. It was in 1800 that Alessandro Volta published details of the first battery. Volta's battery produced electricity using the chemical reaction between certain solutions and metal electrodes. Other scientists, such as John Frederick Daniel, improved Volta's design by using different materials for the electrodes. Today's batteries follow the same basic design, but use modern materials. Lightning flash. In 1752, American inventor Benjamin Franklin is said to have flown a kite in a thunderstorm. Electricity flowed down the wet line and produced a small spark, showing that lightning bolts were huge electric sparks. Animal electricity. In 1771, Luigi Galvani found that the legs of dead frogs twitched when they were touched with metal rods. He thought the legs contained animal electricity. Volta suggested a different explanation. Animals do produce electricity, but the twitching of the frog's legs was probably caused by the metal rods and the moisture in the legs forming a simple cell. Volta's pile. Volta's battery or pile consisted of discs of zinc and silver or copper separated by pads moistened with a weak acid or salt solution. Electricity flowed through a wire linking the top and bottom discs. An electrical unit, the volt, is named after Volta. Bucket chemistry. To produce higher voltages and thus larger currents, many cells, each consisting of a pair of electrodes of different metals, were connected together. The common voltaic cell consists of copper and zinc, electrodes immersed in weak acid. The English inventor William Cruikshank created this trough battery in 1800. The metal plates were soldered back to back and cemented into slots in a wooden case. The case was then filled with a dilute acid or a solution of ammonium chloride, a salt. Dipping in and drying out. In about 1813, William Hyde Wollaston, an English chemist, created a battery like this. Zinc plates were fixed between the arms of U-shaped copper plates, so that both sides of the zinc were used. The zinc plates were lifted out of the electrolyte solution to save zinc when the battery was not in use. Reliable electricity. The Daniell cell was the first reliable source of electricity. It produced a steady voltage over a considerable time. The cell has a copper electrode immersed in copper sulfate solution and a zinc electrode in sulfuric acid. The liquids are kept separate by a porous pot. Copper can acting as electrode and a porous pot. Wilhelm Röntgen. The German scientist Wilhelm Röntgen discovered X-rays in 1895. Röntgen did not understand what these rays were, so he named them X-rays. Gassner cell. Chemist Carl Gassner developed a pioneering type of dry cell in 1887. He used a zinc case as the negative electrode and a carbon rod as the positive electrode. In between them was a paste of an ammonium chloride solution and plaster of Paris. Rechargeable battery. The French scientist Gaston Planté invented the lead-acid accumulator in 1859, which can be recharged when it runs down. It has electrodes of lead and lead oxide in strong sulfuric acid. Hubble bubble. Some early batteries used concentrated nitric acid, but they gave off poisonous fumes. To avoid such hazards, the bichromate cell was developed in the 1850s. It used a glass flask filled with chromic acid. Zinc and carbon plates were used as electrodes. Power packs. The so-called dry cell has a moist paste electrolyte inside a zinc container, which acts as one electrode. The other electrode is manganese dioxide, connected via a carbon rod. Small modern batteries use a variety of materials for the electrodes. Mercury batteries were the first long-life dry cells. Most rechargeable batteries use lithium, the lightest of metals. They can be recharged hundreds of times and are used in laptops, mobile phones, and portable music players. Photography. The invention of photography made accurate images of any object rapidly available for the first time. It sprang from a combination of optics and chemistry. The projection of the sun's image on a screen had been explored by Arab astronomers in the 9th century CE and by the Chinese before them. By the 16th century, Italian artists such as Canaletto were using lenses and a camera obscura to help them make accurate drawings. In 1725, a German professor, Johann Heinrich Schulze, showed that the darkening of silver nitrate solution when exposed to the sun was caused by light, not heat. In 1827, a permanent visual record of an object was made by coating a metal plate with a light-sensitive material. In the black box, the camera obscura, from the Latin for darkroom, was at first just a darkened room or large box with a tiny opening at the front and a screen or wall at the back onto which images were projected. From the 16th century, a lens was used instead of the pinhole. The daguerreotype. Nicephore Niepce took the first surviving photograph in 1825. He coated a pewter plate with bitumen and exposed it in a camera. Where light struck, the bitumen hardened. The unhardened areas were then dissolved away to leave a visible image. In 1839, his one-time partner, Louis-Jacques Mandet Daguerre, developed a superior photographic process, producing the daguerreotype. The daguerreotype image. A daguerreotype comprised of a copper plate coated with silver and treated with iodine, vapour, to make it sensitive to light. It was exposed in the camera, then the image was developed by mercury, vapour, and fixed with a strong solution of ordinary salt. By using screw-in lens fittings and different size diaphragm rings to adjust the lens aperture, as on this folding daguerreotype camera of the 1840s, it became possible to photograph both close-up and distant objects in a variety of lighting conditions. Exposing the plate. In some daguerreotype cameras, the object was viewed through a hole in the back of the box. Then the photograph plate, protected by a cover, was slid into place. The lens cap and the cover were removed to expose the plate and then replaced. Enlargements could not be made with the early photographic processes, so for large pictures, big glass plates were used, with a dark lens for inspecting wet plates as they were exposed. Water, chemicals and plates. The equipment could weigh more than 50 kilograms or 110 pounds. A calotype image. By 1841, Englishman William Henry Fox Talbot had developed the calotype. This is an early example. It was an improved version of a process he had announced 2 years before. Within days of Daguerre's announcement, it provided a negative image from which positives could be printed. The wet plate. From 1839 on, the pioneers of photography concentrated on the use of salts of silver as the light-sensitive material. In 1851, Frederick Scott Archer created a glass photographic plate, more light-sensitive than its predecessors. It recorded negative images of fine detail with exposures of less than 30 seconds. The plate was coated with a chemical mix, put in the camera and exposed while still wet. It was messy but gave excellent quality and much faster photos. A plate holder. Chemicals. A wet plate consisted of a glass sheet coated with silver salts and a sticky material called collodion. It was usually developed with pyrogallic acid and fixed with sodium thiosulfate or hypo. Chemicals were dispensed from small bottles. This wet plate camera was mounted on a tripod. The rear section into which the photographic plate was inserted could slide forward or away from the front lens section to increase or decrease the image size and produce a clear picture. Fine focusing was by means of a knob on the lens tube. Moving on, in the 1870s, dry gelatine-coated plates covered with extremely light-sensitive silver bromide were developed. Soon, more sensitive paper allowed many prints to be made from a negative quickly and easily in a darkroom. In 1888, American George Eastman introduced a small, lightweight camera. It used film which came on a roll. By the 1920s, German optical instrument manufacturers, such as Carl Zeiss, were developing small precision cameras. This 1937 single-lens reflex film camera is typical of those used until the 1990s, when digital cameras were made film cameras obsolete. Photography for all. In the early 1900s, Eastman developed cheap brownie box cameras such as this, and amateur photography was born. Each time a photo was taken, you would wind on the film, ready for the next shot. Roll film. Eastman's early roll film consisted of a long, thin strip of paper from which the negative coating was stripped and put down on glass plates before printing. In 1889, cellulite roll film came on the market. The light-sensitive emulsion was coated onto a see-through base so that the stripping process was eliminated. Medical inventions. People have always practiced some form of medicine. Early peoples used herbs to cure illnesses. Some prehistoric skulls have been found with round holes, probably drilled with a trepan, a surgeon's circular saw. The ancient Greeks used this operation to relieve pressure on the brain after severe head injuries. The ancient Chinese practiced acupuncture, inserting needles into one part of the body to relieve pain or the symptoms of disease in another part. But until well into the 19th century, a surgeon's instruments differed little from early ones. Scalpels, forceps, various hooks, saws, and other tools to perform amputations or to extract teeth. The first instruments used to determine the cause of illnesses were developed in Renaissance Europe, following the pioneering anatomical work of scientists such as Leonardo da Vinci and Andreas Vesalius. In the 19th century, medicine developed quickly. Many of the instruments still used in medicine and dentistry today, from stethoscopes to dental drills, were developed at this time. Syringes were first used in ancient India, China, and North Africa. Nowadays, syringes consist of a hollow glass or plastic barrel and a plunger. A syringe fitted with a needle was first used around 1850 by French surgeon Charles Gabriel Provaz to introduce fluids into veins. Numbing pain. Before the introduction of anaesthetics in 1846, surgery was done while the patient was still conscious and capable of feeling pain. To numb pain, nitrous oxide or laughing gas, ether, or chloroform were used. The gases were inhaled via a face mask. You won't feel a thing. By the 1850s, anaesthetics were used by dentists to kill pain. The first dental drills appeared in the 1860s. The Harrington-Irado clockwork dental drill dates from about 1864. When fully wound, it worked for up to 2 minutes. A carbolic acid reservoir and a steam generator. Porcelain teeth, a coiled spring. The first full set of false teeth similar to those used today was made in France in the 1780s. This set of partial dentures dates from about 1860. Blood pressure is measured by feeling the pulse and slowly applying a measured force to the skin until the pulse disappears. The instrument to do this was invented by Samuel von Basch and called a sphygmomanometer. Hot under the collar. These thermometers from about 1865 were placed in the mouth, the straight version, or under the armpit, the curved type. Measuring the patient's temperature was not common practice until the early 20th century. In the 19th century, ether was used as an anaesthetic. The Letheon ether inhaler of 1847 comprised a glass jar filled with ether-soaked sponges through which air was drawn as the patient breathed. In 1816, French physician René Laennec created a tube through which he could hear the patient's heartbeat. By 1865, Scottish surgeon Joseph Lister had developed an antiseptic carbolic steam spray. It created a mist of carbolic acid intended to kill germs around the operation site. This version dates from about 1875. Listening in. Laennec's single-tube stethoscope was later developed into this 1855 version of the present-day design with 2 earpieces. The stethoscope can be used to listen to the sounds made by the heart, lungs, or blood vessels, or to the heartbeat of a baby in the womb. In the early 17th century, physician William Harvey was the first to show how blood circulated around the body, but it wasn't until much later that the link between the pulse, heart activity, and health was established. The disc-shaped sound collector on this 1830s stethoscope would have been used to listen to high-pitched sounds like those made by the lungs, rather than low-pitched ones which heartbeats produced. The telephone. For centuries, people have tried to send signals over long distances using bonfires and flashing mirrors to transmit messages. It was Frenchman Claude Chappe who, in 1793, devised the word telegraph, literally writing at a distance, to describe his message machine. Moving arms mounted on tower tops signalled numbers and letters. Over the next 40 years, electric telegraphs were developed. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell patented the telephone, enabling speech to be sent along wires for the first time. Bell's work for the deaf led to an interest in how sounds are produced by vibrations in the air. His research on a device called the harmonic telegraph led him to discover that an electric current could be changed to resemble the vibrations made by a speaking voice. This was the principle on which his work on the telephone was based. Alexander Graham Bell developed the telephone after working with deaf people as a speech teacher. Here he is making the first call on the New York to Chicago line. Early models such as Bell's box telephone of 1876 to 77 had a trumpet-like mouthpiece and earpiece combined. The instrument contains a membrane that vibrated when someone spoke into the mouthpiece. The vibrations created a varying electric current in a wire, and the receiver turns the varying current back into vibrations that you could hear. The forerunner of the telephone, the telegraph, allowed signals to be sent along a wire. The first telegraphs were used on the railways to help keep track of trains. Later, telegraph wire linked major cities. Earpiece. In this earpiece of about 1878, a fluctuating electric current passing through the wire coil made the iron diaphragm move to make sounds. In 1877, Thomas Edison developed a different mouthpiece and earpiece units. Models such as this were hung from a special switch that disconnected the line on closing. Some early telegraph cables used copper wires sheathed in glass. Overhead telegraph and phone wires used iron for strength. Easy listening. This wall-mounted telephone of 1879 was invented by Thomas Edison and has a microphone and receiver. Of his design, the user had to wind the handle while listening. A ring of the bell indicated an incoming call or a successful connection. The earliest telephone exchanges were manual. An operator took your number and the number you wanted. Then he or she plugged the wire from your phone into a switchboard to make a complete electrical circuit connection to the other phone. Handsets. By 1885, the transmitter and receiver had been combined to form a handset. At first this was metal, but by 1929, plastic handsets were common. Some candlestick-shaped phones of the 1920s and 1930s had a dial for calling numbers via an automatic exchange. Cradle telephones like this were popular by the 1800s. This one dates from 1937, by which time there was a transatlantic telephone service between London and New York. And this is where I'm going to stop the video, and I really hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please join me again soon for another one. Thank you for watching.